Omaha's news leader, chronicling the stories and people making a difference in our community. This is KETV Newswatch 7's Chronicle.
Good morning. I'm Julie Cornell. The November election is just under a month away, so we're devoting all of our shows between now and then to that crucial vote. It's part of our year-long commitment to cover the issues and candidates running in 2018. Now, we've talked to two of the three candidates running for Senate. The drama in Washington regarding Judge Brett Kavanaugh pushed back our interview with Senator Deb Fischer. So we're going to have that for you in the next couple of weeks. We've moved on now to one of the most hotly contested seats in Congress, Nebraska's 2nd District race. It pits first-term incumbent Republican Don Bacon against Democrat Kara Eastman. And Kara is with us here this morning. Thanks so much for being here.
It's a pleasure to be here.
How are you doing?
I'm doing great, thank you. Yeah, we've only got 35 days left.
We're rolling away.
Maybe I shouldn't say that.
It's all right. President Obama gave you his endorsement recently. What do you think about that?
That was quite an honor and something that was great for all of the constituents in the district to see that a former president would come in and endorse somebody in Nebraska. So I'm very proud to have that endorsement.
Right. I'm sure. NBC has called you the new darling on the left. Do you think that that is fitting?
I don't know. This has been the greatest honor of my life to be able to do this. And I'm just proud of everything that we've accomplished in this campaign.
And you got to be happy that NBC knows your name.
Absolutely. Exactly.
I see that there's an organization called Swing Left, and they gave your campaign a pretty big contribution, $22,000. What do they stand for?
So Swing Left is a group that grew out of the 2016 election and is really trying to help get candidates elected around the country who represent their values. It's a grassroots organization, and so those contributions actually came from individuals, a lot of individuals actually, and that was something also that we were really proud to have.
There are 23 very important states, 23 very important races where Democrats could kind of turn the tables here, and Nebraska is one of them. Does that kind of put some pressure on you?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. But I mean, it's an interesting time in American politics, and we need people to step up, people coming from different backgrounds, different ideologies, and fight for our country right now.
Do you think people are energized? You know, we talk about the blue wave, we talk about, is this the year of the woman in Washington? Are those things happening?
I think people are energized by our campaign in a lot of ways because we're speaking to their values. We've gone out and knocked on over 100,000 doors in the district, and people are excited about a candidate who represents them.
We look at the money that Don Bacon has raised, $1.8 million. You've raised $782,000, so he's more than doubled you. Is that concerning? Is this about money?
Well, first of all, we've raised a lot more than that, and those numbers will be coming out soon. But this campaign is people-powered. We have over 80,000 individual donors to this campaign, as opposed to my opponent, who the majority of his money has come from corporate PACs. So
and that was another question I had. What do you think about PACs?
Well, so I have refused to take corporate PAC money in my campaign because I believe that politicians should represent people and not large corporations. And so that's another fact that I'm really proud of, that this is really about the people of this district.
More grassroots.
Exactly.
Right. You've talked in the past about college for all, that college should be available for everyone, and that would be great if it could be free. We both have high school seniors right now. We know what college costs.
Right.
How would that all work, or is it just is it a dream?
It's not a dream, actually. It's a viable policy solution right now. I'm on the board of governors of Metropolitan Community College. I think Metro is one of the greatest institutions in our community, but we still have people that are drowning in student debt. We have a student debt crisis in this country where people are paying more in their student loan debts than they are for automobile loans. I mean, housing loans. So this is crazy. I mean, we have to do something about this for our kids, for our senior citizens. 20% of seniors are paying too much in student loans. So there are policy solutions out there, a lot of creative solutions where we could be providing debt-free tuition to people. I do believe that people need a little bit of skin in the game, so I don't like the word free.
Right.
But I think making sure that our students are not encumbered by so much debt when they leave college is critical to our economy and to this ability to fulfill the American dream.
This keeps coming back to me, but there's an ad that's running right now. It's not one of yours, but they have taken one of your ads and turned it to black and white, and they say Kara Eastman is going to raise your taxes. I mean, that's the central message of this commercial, that they kind of flipped on you, and I think perhaps College for All, paying for it is a big question mark. How would you pay for something like that? Give me some examples.
Well, so the thing about the College for All Act is that actually the boon to the economy would outweigh the costs. And what's interesting about those ads...
I mean, when you're not paying those college loans back, and when you can actually...
and your ability to buy a house, take a vacation, actually put money back into the economy. And those administrative costs to oversee those student loan programs is astronomical. So actually the cost of the federal government might be a wash, and there's some really interesting data coming out about this. But what's interesting about those ads is that it is the tax cut that benefited the very, very wealthy, the billionaires in this country, the large corporations that actually fund those ads, because we've seen that billionaires have funneled so much money into the Republican Party, and now they're able to put out all those attack ads against me, more attack ads than we've ever seen in Nebraska.
So are you going to raise middle-class taxes?
No, absolutely not, but I do believe that by flipping the tax bill and actually taxing billionaires and large corporations at a fair rate, that we could pay for a lot of the things that we need in our country.
Right. Folks will argue, though, man, the economy's doing so great. The unemployment rate is so low. I see ads everywhere. People are hiring. You know, Amazon just raised their minimum wage to $15 an hour. How can you, swim against that stream?
Well, first of all, it's not necessarily the tax bill that caused all of that stuff. But at the same time, and I mean, I'm very pleased to see Amazon raising.
Isn't it great? I know.
I think everybody should do that.
And you wonder if others will follow suit.
Yeah, hopefully they will. I mean, that should be at least a starting livable wage for people. But look, we've talked to so many people at their doors who are not feeling the impact of that tax bill. People who have said, actually, their insurance premiums went up more than the small raise that they got. Or people who are still having to work 2 or 3 jobs to put food on the table. I'm really concerned about those people, about the people that I talk to in this district. I'm also concerned about the long-term impacts of such extreme handouts to the very wealthy. We know that trickle-down economics doesn't work. And we also, I mean, the Republicans added over $1 trillion to our deficit, which ultimately impacts our ability to have discretionary funding, which could impact our national security.
I think I read somewhere we would each owe $65,000 to pay it off. You want to see the tax overhaul, the tax cut plan reeled back. I read somewhere 35% to 35%?
Well, I think that the corporate tax rate needs to go up. I mean, right now the effective tax rate, what corporations actually pay, is like 14%. I mean, that is not their fair share. And that's very similar for the billionaire class. They don't need the handout. They don't need the help. But regular working people, people in this district who are struggling, they're the ones that need help right now.
They're the ones that you're trying to appeal to.
They're the ones that I am appealing to because I'm speaking their language, because we have enough politicians that are working on behalf of the very wealthy and the large corporations. We need politicians who represent the people.
Right. Where do the millennials fall in all of this? Because they're our biggest voting bloc, but they're just not showing up. 14% I think showed up in Douglas and Sarpy counties in the last election.
Right.
Where are they?
Well, I mean, I'm very proud of the fact that we've had a lot of younger people get involved in this campaign, but I think part of it is they feel like their vote doesn't matter, that their voice doesn't matter. But when we're speaking to them about student loan debt, about health care, about things that they care about, like school shootings, in some ways our younger people have taken the lead on these issues and are doing more, at least vocally, than we've seen in a long time. And I hope that that will translate into more votes in November.
Do you think perhaps that what's going on with Judge Kavanaugh has maybe energized people to show up and have a voice?
I think people are frustrated and particularly fearful about the way that hearing has gone on. I've heard from a lot of women where I brought up issues for them. But I think most important about that hearing is the fact that Judge Kavanaugh was so clearly politicized and made himself politicized by aligning himself with one party over another. We need people on the Supreme Court who represent all of us and people who are going to be fair. And the idea that we would have somebody who's so outspoken about his partisan politics, it's just not the right fit for this country. Did
you watch the hearings?
I did.
How much did you watch, and what was your overall impression when you left it?
I watched the majority of them. I felt like Judge Kavanaugh showed himself not to be the right fit for the Supreme Court. I thought his demeanor was odd. I thought that the way he carried himself was weird. And I just felt like there were clearly times where he wasn't being 100% truthful with the American public. We need somebody on the Supreme Court who's going to fight for everybody. And even if you're picked by a Republican president, you can still be fair when it comes to making these decisions that impact so many of us.
You don't think he has that in him?
I think he proved himself that he does not have that in him.
Tell me about, you've been a really vocal supporter of women's issues. Do you think this particular issue in the media helps or hurts the cause?
The cause of the women's...
For women. Mm-hmm.
Oh, I think this has, in some ways, hurt women tremendously. The way that Republican senators were talking about Dr. Ford, even the way that she was treated. I mean, look, there are so many women in this country, obviously the Me Too movement has brought this to light, who've been subjected to sexual harassment in one form or another. And it's despicable the way that we treat women when they're coming forward, having the gumption and being brave enough to put yourself out there for no gain. I mean, what is she gaining from this?
Do you feel like the process was flawed? Like she should have maybe been able to talk about this in a private setting and he could have been vetted in a private setting? Did it all have to be on national television?
Well, I think the process was flawed because it's been so rushed, and it seems like we could be a little bit more thorough when we're deciding who's going to be on the Supreme Court.
I want to kind of switch gears here. Let's talk about gun violence. And our kids are that age. They're in high school. They're heading to college. We worry when they're out of the house. These school shootings that have happened around our country. You are in support of an assault rifle ban. Is that true?
So, look, the day after the Parkland shooting, my daughter Sabina came to me and said she was afraid to go to school. I still remember looking at her and telling her, like, look, you've got to go to school. Everything's going to be okay. But in my heart, I knew that I didn't know if everything was going to be okay. I support things that 93% of Americans support. Background checks, waiting periods, and a ban on the sale of weapons of war that don't need to be in the hands of people who shouldn't have them. I mean, these are weapons designed solely to gun down other humans. They shouldn't be sold in this country. And we can do all of this while acknowledging that there are responsible gun owners out there, and that they have a right to have a safe handgun that's locked up properly.
Sure.
But make sure that guns aren't in the hands of people who are using them to kill other humans.
Right. What do you do about those assault rifles that are already out there?
Well, there are some great programs in other countries where they've had buyback programs that have worked really successfully. I think that's one way that we could do that.
Okay, very good. We're going to wrap up this session right now. We're going to come back after the break and talk some more.
Okay, great.
All right. Thanks, Kara. We'll be right back. You're watching KETV Newswatch 7's Chronicle. This is a special Commitment 2018 edition of KETV Newswatch 7's Chronicle. Welcome. Joining me this morning is Democrat Kara Eastman, who's running in Nebraska's 2nd Congressional District. We've been talking a lot. We're going to continue the conversation. Let's talk a little bit about the deal that President Trump kind of pushed through this week with Mexico and Canada, the trade deal. What do you think?
So it's an interesting trade deal. It looks a lot like something that Obama had crafted before he left office. But I think there's a lot of great things in that deal. I think that that NAFTA needed to be renegotiated, and but there's some things that we haven't seen yet in there. One would be protections for workers, where there's an enforcement mechanism for those protections. Also, some environmental protections. So I support fair trade, and especially trade that benefits working people,
right,
and also protects the environment.
It seems like it will really benefit Nebraska with ag products that we have to send around,
yeah,
right? Very good. Let's talk about the Farm Bill. Expired at the end of September. What do you think needs to get passed as part of that bill?
So I think it's important for people to remember that SNAP, which provides food to people living in poverty in particular, is tied into that bill. Okay. So we have to make sure that we're funding those kinds of programs, because there's so many people in the district that rely heavily on them to access their food. We have to make sure that there are pipelines in Nebraska for people to have healthy nutrition, right, and so that's a significant piece that needs to be included in there.
We talk about food deserts, and they exist even right here in Omaha.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you can drive around parts of North Omaha where it's actually pretty difficult to find a grocery store.
The president wants some tougher work requirements attached to SNAP. Do you think that that is a wise idea?
I think that's out of touch with the people that are actually accessing SNAP. And as a social worker who's been working in the community for over 12 years, these are people that I've had the opportunity to know. They're not accessing these programs because they need to be working harder. They're actually working pretty hard and rely on those programs to feed their children.
Right. I actually run into parents who are working 2 jobs and they're using SNAP still just to get by.
Exactly.
So it's not like they're not working?
Right.
Okay. I know the environment is near and dear to your heart with your work with the Omaha Healthy Kids Alliance. What do you think about President Trump pulling the U.S. out of the Paris Climate Accords?
So I don't think that that was the best solution for the country. I think that we have to be taking climate change very seriously. I believe it's the #1 moral issue facing our kids because we're leaving this disaster for them to clean up. And I think there's a number of ways that in Nebraska in particular that we could be investing in renewable energy and making sure that those investments are not only benefiting everyone in Nebraska in terms of providing a workforce and providing good paying jobs, but also that we are impacting climate.
I just read an article on wind energy and how Nebraska could just be, booming with it. I mean, Iowa has taken it on, and we haven't even blinked at it. But this is the place. It's windy here, says my meteorologist husband.
That's right. Absolutely. Another area that we could be doing more is in green and healthy housing, and that's something that I've been working in for 12 years. If we invest in making homes more energy efficient, people would see a significant saving in their utility bills, and we'd have a better and safer communities.
What's the #1 way we can do that?
So simply by creating those investments in affordable, safe, healthy housing.
Insulation.
Insulation is one of those things. Weather stripping. I mean, there are a number of things. Window replacement is actually a great way because we get rid of lead from homes and also make the homes more energy efficient.
Oh my gosh, windows are so expensive.
They are really expensive, yeah.
All right, let's move on to the Keystone XL pipeline. What do you think?
So I've been a vocal opponent of the Keystone Pipeline. I publicly testified against it, having spoken to so many people in the district that agree with me on this, that we don't need it. The oil doesn't actually even benefit us. And the reality is that we're putting these pipelines through land that is not ours, and so not allowing people who own the land, especially indigenous people, to have a say in this, but also potentially destroying our environment. I have seen firsthand when it environmentally when we have contamination in our environment in the Superfund site here in Omaha. I've seen what that can do to a community and don't want that to happen anywhere else in Nebraska.
Is it too late to do anything about it? Hasn't the train left the station on this issue? I mean,
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, I think if people actually keep speaking up and if we have policymakers who are willing to actually stand up for Nebraskans, it'd be one way to solve the problem.
Let's talk about military spending. Do you think it's out of whack? Is it out of control? How would you address that issue?
I think that when it comes to military spending, the question is not are we spending too much or too little, but how are we spending those funds? So right now, my main concern is the inadequate amount of funding at the State Department, because we know that that we're not spending enough there, and 2, that we have significant cabinet positions that have not been filled under the Trump administration. That jeopardizes our national security. It also creates a problem where we're not able to engage in diplomacy in the way that we need to be to protect our veterans, protect our active military.
Why haven't those positions been filled?
I don't know.
All right, good question. What would you do to help Nebraska veterans?
Well, so I've talked to so many vets in this district, and the #1 thing that they talk about, well, actually there are 2 things, housing and healthcare. That we need to modernize the VA. We need to make sure that we are investing in our vets so that they have all of the things that they deserve. I mean, for somebody to put themselves in that position of serving our country in the way that they do, but then to come back and not have adequate housing or not have adequate healthcare is immoral. And so it's time for us to actually stand up for veterans.
Right. It seems like they continue to fight once they get home.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Let's talk about health care for our families. I still know people who don't have health care. They're self-employed. They say they can't afford it. I think we have 1 provider in Nebraska. That's a problem.
It is.
What do you think we should do about it?
So I believe that health care is a right, and that in the wealthiest nation in the world, we can afford to provide health care to every American citizen. And I've talked to so many people now at their doors. Health care is the #1 issue that I hear from people. And if it comes to people paying extraordinary costs in prescription drugs. I met a woman the other day who said she's paying $18,000 a month for prescriptions for her family. If it comes to not being able to access health care, premiums that have gone up, premiums that are some of the highest in the country.
And you still can't get in to see a doctor.
Exactly, long
Right.
wait lines to see a doctor, exactly. Our system is broken and needs to be fixed.
How do we fix it?
So I'm a proponent of Medicare for All because I read and studied the Expanded and Improved Medicare for All Act and believe it is the best policy solution we have in front of us in terms of providing health care to every citizen of this country.
Gosh, how will I pay for that? Will I lose half my paycheck, you know?
Well, the nice thing about it is that it actually saves the federal government money over time, and at the same time by imposing a small fee on families. So if we look at an average family making $54,000 a year, a family of 4, they're right now paying about $10,000 a year in copays, premiums, deductibles, out-of-pocket costs. We're talking about an $800 a year fee. Who would take the $10,000 over the $800? I mean, it's actually a cost savings for everybody because we can't sustain the practice that we already have with healthcare in this country.
Who's making all the money? Is it the doctors? Is it the healthcare systems?
Well, there are a lot of people that benefit from our current free market healthcare. I mean, so yes, everybody that you named is making money from this. But
Right.
the reality is, I mean, you've got pharmaceutical companies that are profiting off people, insurance companies. I mean, and the reality is, when you talk to regular working families in this district, they're struggling and having to choose between seeking medical care and putting food on their table. I met a woman the other day who said that she's treating her daughter for her medical issues because she can't afford to take her to the doctor. This is not who we are as Americans.
Can we afford this, though? I mean, how can you do it? What did you say, $800?
This would be an $800 increase in people for people around the country.
Okay.
I mean, again, when we look at what people are spending, my friend just told me the other day he's spending $4,000 a month for his family to have health care. I mean, so if we actually look at a collective system where the federal government could use its collective bargaining power to make sure that costs are lowered, this is a win-win for everybody.
I know that in one of your commercials you talk about health care and in particular your mother's bills. Is that one of the things going on in your life that kind of pushed you to run for office?
Yeah, I decided to run really when my mother was diagnosed with cancer for the 5th time and prescribed a $2,500 pill that she couldn't afford to pay. The problem was that was in addition to the $800 she was already paying every month, and that was with Medicare. There's a problem there, and the issue came where when I asked my mom, what does this mean that we can't afford to pay for this pill? She said it meant she wouldn't be able to leave the home until she died a year ago.
Wow.
There are so many people that I have talked to in this district, people at their doors who are telling me they're facing the exact same thing.
Sure.
And I don't want anybody to have to go through what my mom went through and then what our family went through after all those bills started coming to us after she passed away.
Right, okay. Cara, stay right here. We'll be right back with some final thoughts. This is KETV Newswatch 7's Chronicle. Today we've been talking with 2nd Congressional District candidate Democrat Cara Eastman. And as we do with all our candidates, we want to give you a minute to make a final pitch to voters. Cara.
Thank you. I am a social worker who has been running nonprofits for my whole career. For the last 12 years, I've been running Omaha Healthy Kids Alliance, where I've raised $13 million to invest in creating safe, energy-efficient, healthy housing for kids in our community. Those are the experiences, that's the kind of expertise that I want to bring to Congress. I am passionate about healthcare. I am passionate about education as a member of the Board of Governors of Metropolitan Community College. And I have committed to fight for people. When we launched the campaign, I promised my daughter that we would not put winning ahead of integrity, and that is the campaign that we have run. This is a people-powered campaign where we're out there talking to people at over 100,000 doors in the district, asking people what they're looking for in their representative, and asking them about the issues that they care about. I am somebody that is going to fight for you. Unlike my opponent, who has voted almost 100% of the time with his own party, I will be a voice for you in Congress. And I would love to earn your vote on November 6th, my birthday.
Your birthday. Happy birthday. Thank you so much, Cara. Cara Eastman, who's hoping to represent Nebraska's 2nd Congressional District. If you missed part of this interview, it's online right now. Just go to KETV.com. You can go to our homepage, click on the menu button, and then look for Chronicle. And next week, we're going to talk with Eastman's opponent, Republican Congressman Don Bacon. I'm Julie Cornell. Thanks for watching. We'll see you back here next Sunday morning.